Happy! I was about to say New Year's. Happy birthday, USA of America, 250th anniversary. The 4th of July is here. But now, with all that being said, let's take you viewers down to July the 12th, 1997 from Nevada. But before we get to that, we might as well talk about the episode, what we're here to talk about. And I just said it. That's all I have to say. So now before we get to it, before we go back to 1997, we might as well talk about what's going on today in the world of professional boxing and everything that's going on with the FIFA World Cup as I'm recording this. Now, of course, it's not the 4th of July. Today's the 3rd of July as I'm recording this, so it's not 250 yet, but what difference does it make? What difference does it make? Whether if I'm recording this a day before or a day after, what difference does it make? But to be honest, we might as well get through with it. 250 years, everything has been going on high alert as we speak. And by the way, just to be with all due to respect, we might as well talk about UFC Freedom 250, which took place in the White House. Well, in the front entrance of the White House. And to be honest, it's a doozy. Even though they've estimated and announced that 4,300 people were there at the time, they actually worldwide viewership of this number was 34 million people around the world actually watched this, and which might be the same amount of views as how WWF Saturday Main Event back in February of 1988, where the Andre the Giant defeating Hulk Hogan for the WWF champion, then vacating the belt to Ted DiBiase that same night, would be different. And by the way, speaking about professional wrestling, I'm actually gonna review some pay-per-views of professional wrestling just for the fun of it in the future, so stay tuned to that. But yeah, the entirety was pretty good. The entire show had moments. I can't say nothing about anything else other than there has been reported of an aftermath where they reported that even though around the time, which they had 11 or 10 fights around the time, reports stated on post-fight interview with Joe Rogan stated that fighter Josh Huckett repeatedly previously stated false claim that former First Lady Michelle Obama was actually a man. Not kidding. That's what it says on Wikipedia. And when I actually first read about this before I was going to make this episode, I was like, wow, how the heck did I miss this out? And even though it's been technically from June the 14th, so it's 21st, 28th. Man, about 3 weeks ago since this fight happened. And I didn't know that. So that really kind of got me a little bit deterred over this entirety. Not even knowing about that is pretty funny to think of. And I'm surprised that I didn't even think about putting it up on an Observer to talk about that, because I actually didn't know. But again, I always talk about boxing more than anything else. But of course, Dana White did told the time that he was completely against saying nasty and false things about people's families and such. And no sanction was announced, so surprisingly, nothing came of it. But they also reported on June the 10th, or something around June the 10th, where due to an attempt terrorist attack. The paragraph says here, quote, after the event, the FBI claimed they disrupted an attempt terrorist attack with a target being attendance of the event. According to investigators, the plan involved using explosive-laden drones to strike buildings near the event, triggering an evacuation. Attendees would then be directed toward an area where snipers were positioned by a planned attack on the White House gates. The FBI reportedly discovered the threat on June the 10th, with suspects allegedly conducting final preparations in in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Numerous suspects were later taken into custody, end quote. So yeah, that right there says a lot about the craziness about what the world is going on. It's crazy. By the way, they did recorded right here that consider that they're higher. The card did brought in high numbers with viewers of reportedly of 200,000 fans attending the 2-day event on the in the Eclipse. And viewership numbers on Paramount Plus were monstrous, with Paramount Plus rewarded an average of 8.2 million, with viewers and at least 17 million unique viewers in the US and Latin America, making it the most watched exclusive live event in Paramount Plus to date. Again, it is surprisingly to find that surprisingly. Like 1988 was pretty hard to find television to watch stuff, and you watch a Saturday night main event on WWF, which was a 1 hour show with 2 matches all in all, but still. And then you watch this, like, it does go to show you craziness. But of course, world champion Leah Topuria lost after the end of round 4 because he didn't he didn't step into the 5th and final round. So the Intercontinental or interim lightweight champion, Justin Gaithier, Justin came out and did a hard fought against him. And by the end of round 4, they were about to come into the 5th and final round, but the fight was stopped before the 5th round. So Justin became the new champion of the lightweight. We also have for the interim UFC heavyweight championship fight with Kirill Gain defeating Alex Pereira to win out the UFC interim heavyweight belt. With other fights on the show, mostly all of the fights, including the other 5 fights that were not title fights after all 7 professional fights ended by TKO. Only one of them was a KO fight. None of them ended by decision, which meant that the fights were mostly of knockouts and performances. The fight of the night was given to Justin for winning the lightweight title. And the performance of the night was none other than Justin again, which is weird because it just says performance of the night was Justin and Kirill Gain, which I'm surprised that they're both awarded similar. Like, I don't think that's ever happened before where you have 2 people being awarded the same thing in the same night, in the event. That right there is kind of ridiculous. But anyway, they did try their best to put out the best show they could do. Donald Trump did his best at the time of the event with family members and all. He did shook hands with Sean O'Malley at the time when Sean O'Malley defeated Zahabi in the bantamweight by a round 2 TKO with punches. As for knockout of the night, there is nothing to be awarded with knockout of the night, unfortunately. So we don't know why they don't have that, but it is what it is. They also brought out bonus awards, which is kind of funny, where they had mostly a special $1 million of cryptocurrencies for the event to be split evenly between Justin Gaithier and Leah Topuria during their fight, which is kind of crazy. And even Dana White announced awards for World Liberty Financial and a venture of Donald Trump's and his family of Steve Witkoff. Award. They were also wearing out new sponsors of added $250,000 of bonus pool, and with other thing with performance of the night would be a receipt of $100,000 earned from a $125,000 in USD one sponsored. So yeah, there's so much to this, and it was also from Crypto.com. So I'm not into that type of stuff as much, but all in all, the event went on with no problem at all, which at least everything was taken care of. And this just goes to show you that it is hard to schedule these events in today's world of how dangerous the outside world is. But luckily, the FBI and everyone stopped the danger from happening, and that's pretty good. So at least nothing happened at the end, and everyone got out safe. So after talking about since June the 30th, since talking about Norway defeating Ivory Coast, France defeated Sweden 3-0, and after their star player Mbappe scored goals from 45 to 74 minutes, goal 1 and 3, and another friend of theirs named Barcola scored a one at number 53 minutes. That same day, Mexico defeated Ecuador to now make it to the quarterfinals, which, no, this is still the round of 32, by the way. I forgot about that. But yeah, Mexico wins their fourth match this year against Ecuador. They scored 22 and 31 minutes early. The Congo scored an early goal on July the 1st, a couple of days ago, as we talked about. They scored one at 7 minutes. But England came out of nowhere at 75 to 86 and won. But again, I have to say to myself, this right here was crazy. When Belgium, I felt bad that Senegal from Africa could not get the job done, and they got lost to a European country. They were winning goals from 25 to 51 minutes, and at 86 minutes, a guy from Belgium gets the goal win. Another guy named Tyleman scored a goal at 89 minutes. They went to extra goals before going to penalty kicks, and at 125 minutes, depending on how many penalties they had, Belgium, their same friend, Ty, scored another goal to win. It kind of stinks. But the real story came where USA finally got a win after, since 2010 or 2006, when they defeated a country to make it to the quarterfinals, but failed against an African, not an African country, but still, utterly failed to make it to the semis at the end. But yes, their players scored a couple goals against Bosnia and won. July the 2nd, Spain, their player Oyarzabal scored goals from 36 to 89 minutes. Another friend of theirs named Porro scored one at 66 to defeat Australia 3-0. But the shocking history came when Croatia scored a goal at 53 minutes against Portugal. But then 13 or so minutes later at 68 minutes, due to a penalty kick, Ronaldo, who I'm going to double guess Ronaldo is one of their star players in Portugal who managed to outplay their star at 68 minutes. Another friend of theirs named Ramos came at 94 minutes before they're going to go to overtime. But nope, Ramos decided to go 2-1, defeat Croatia. I feel bad. Croatia finished second in 2018, third place 4 years ago, and now they faltered to the round of 32. Yeah, it kind of stinks, but it is what it is. You have good years, you have bad years, and Croatia, shockingly bad. As for Switzerland did defeat Algeria, which kind of upsets me because A, Algeria is an African country, and B, Netherlands is a Europe country, so that is upsetting. And consider they scored goals at 10 minutes, and then at the start of the second half at 46 minutes, they scored the other goal. But the thing is, Switzerland are going to compete against whether it's going to be Colombia or Ghana, because they are competing today as we speak, which will be at 8:30 p.m. UTC time, 5. Argentina is taking on Cape Verde, and Australia will take on Egypt. So Australia and Argentina might win a match in the round of 32, and they'll qualify to the round of 16, I'm assuming. If Cape Verde defeats Argentina, that would be a shocking upset, to be honest, which will be shocking enough. Because even though with Australia, whether Australia or Egypt, one of them will surprisingly win. Because these countries have to be afraid, because I can only imagine one of these players from the country are going to injure Lionel Messi, and we're going to have a huge riot on our hands for America, for all this stuff happening. while we're coming close to the 4th of July. So I'm expecting controversy to come anytime now, and maybe a lot of broken hearts. And I'm sure the Japanese people in all of Eastern and Western Asia are now becoming the biggest failures in the FIFA World Cup because not one single country managed to make it. Japan made it to the round of 32, but they lost against Brazil when Brazil scored their final goal in the final minutes of the game, just like some of these other games happening. So, yeah, it's shocking. I am expecting Colombia to win against Ghana and maybe defeat Switzerland here. And whether they have a chance against Argentina, I have a feeling they might have against Argentina. They might have an opportunity. And the thing is, Colombia might not be that good of a country. They're still part of the South African territory of the area. So it's not going to be a hard to reach places. So whether or not anything will go on, who knows? But yeah, after this is over, they're going to have a tournament tomorrow on July the 4th with Canada taking on Morocco and France versus Paraguay. So that right there is going to be the most interesting of them all. I'm expecting Canada and France to win those matches, and then they're going to compete against each other. Again, we're just going to have to wait and see when that time happens. But now we are here to go forward. So let's go right back to July the 12th, 1997, the pay-per-view of Henry Akewande versus Lennox Lewis. Before July, the story, we like to talk about the month of July, and I would like to say this is the closest we can ever celebrate to the 4th of July due to a boxing event. This moment is all crazy. But before we get to it, we better talk about the Wrestling Observer Rewinder and newsletter. And this right here has some wild articles. I'm so out of it. So in Los Angeles, known as Battle of Los Angeles, WWF and WCW went to Los Angeles where Dave called it took place, where they were shouting out PWG years before they even existed during the time, where both WWF and WCW held house shows in the city on the same night, where WCW claimed the attendance of 10,948, while WWF drew 9,469. But despite that, Meltzer and other people believe that WWF are the clear winner of this show, of the house shows, because they got clear of having the most money in the show, being paid money, not just for tickets, but during when the show happened, where it stated that they actually had a bikini contest at the time. And of course, bikini contests and house shows, wild. And I say wild because they actually went on for over 20 minutes. And it stated that all the women were stripping and the crowd began throwing money, which Sonny gladly collected, while Sable wore the least and got the biggest pop to win. Unbelievable. And with the recovered stuff of everything going on, where hurting with everything else, Bret Hart was still making his in-ring return, still with his knee injury, and I have heard about his knee and other stuff he's been going through. And even though he's not 100% recovered, it was worth nothing that these two shows were completely just with something else going on that same night. It's just crazy. And WCW, the problem was about their stuff about when it came to money, they spent tons of money on this show, more than WWF did. Seriously, they were throwing in more productions and other stuff from Nitro, the cost from putting Hogan to work at the show, merchandise sales, everything. And it seemed like the merchandise might have been the only thing keeping them together. And with everything else going on with Chris Jericho winning the Cruiserweight title from Syxx, we already know him, and was booed out of the building by the pro heel crowd, which is what it says, pro heel crowd. Even though Hogan didn't work the match at the show, but he did come out with the rest of the NWO to cut a promo, and the crowd gave Hogan, the rest of the NWO, a huge babyface reaction. Why? But to the end of the show, Sting came down and from the ceiling, beating up the entire NWO, and eventually put Hogan in the Scorpion Deathlock. Again, the only thing that would have kept them from making money would be the merchandise. And technically, that right there. But on this other paragraph, it stated that even though competing with something else going on the same night, and when it says here, when it stated, quote, even though it's worth nothing to the two shows that were competing with them, something going on the same night, which leads us to this. And of course, we have to talk about it. Mike Tyson facing Evander Holyfield. And this part actually got me surprised. So the article states here, quote, one of the strangest boxing matches of all time ended when Tyson bit Holyfield's ear. And when reading this paragraph, I went back and actually listened to Jim Cornette from season 1 of episode 2, Dark Side of the Ring. And I forgot who the French wrestler was. Leon. I forgot the French wrestler's name again. He said in the Dark Side of the Ring, when he was talking to Vince McMahon and Vince Russo about how to get the title away from Bret Hart, and he decided to do a double cross or something. And then I forgot. I really forgot how that went actually. But still. But I'm surprised. It really did surprise me that they are talking about this. But this is where it goes. This isn't wrestling related, but Dave Meltzer covers it. And I mean, come on. We gotta actually, Dave does tie this whole thing into wrestling by talking about an old wrestling incident from 1931 called the Battle of the Bite. Yes. And it states here that it was really long, where they convoluted a story where it involves Ed the Strangler Lewis taking on the French guy, and he was the champion, I think. Oh man, I don't know if it's the same art thing that Jim Cornette said. Oh man, I gotta go back and watch it again. I wasn't even concentrating so much because I was talking about the UFC and the FIFA thing. But yeah, it said that Ed the Strangler Lewis was the guy who intentionally bit himself on the arm and drew blood and made it look like Lewis had done it in order to get Lewis DQ'd so he could win the title, which was a shoot double cross. He wasn't scheduled to win the belt, but when the referee calls a title change in front of the crowd, the promoters had to go with it. From that point on, it became politically in American wrestling, that world titles didn't change hands by DQ anymore, or neither countouts. So if you ever wanted to know why that's a rule, now you know. And we all know now. But back to boxing. Dave says that the sport will survive and Tyson will eventually return to the ring and still draw big money to the people that were overreacting when they say this will kill the sport. And you know what's crazy? Around the time was so ridiculous because other information stated that Mike Tyson was backstage at a Nitro show in Las Vegas 2 nights after the fight with Holyfield. And it stated that they were going to put him onto the show for the heck of it. But it stated that it was going to generate negative publicity right now during the time with the entitle of everything going on during the MGM Grand. And this took place in Las Vegas where WCW were doing this. And they were trying to plan to bring him in. So, yeah, but of course the MGM Grand and the arena by TNT pretty much forbid WCW from doing that. And also that same exact night, WCW was trying to bring in a guy named Jose Lothario for the show, not for any real reason, but just for people trying to talk about trying to stick it with WWF, which never happened. They even talked about how WCW were releasing several wrestlers from Michael Wall Street, Craig Pittman, the Nasty Boys, Jim Duggan, Joe Gomez, Ice Train, and Nancy Sullivan. Unfortunately, Nancy Sullivan, Word, who was in Kevin Sullivan, stated at the time, former wife and husband, actually split it up in real life, although there has been nothing to do with the storyline. But they do believe that they can safely say that Dave had that one thing wrong. They also stated at the time that Michael Moore was also at the event the same night, but they asked the people to not, the commentators, they asked them not to talk about it, not to talk about the boxers or the champions or Tyson or Moore. They didn't want to talk about that just for the environment that happened at the time. And he was in the front row for the show as well. So, yeah, all this stuff happening is crazy. But you want to know what's something else that really does upset me? Speaking about Jim Cornette and him talking about the double cross from the whole ear bite or the Battle of the Bite, Jim Cornette debuted in ECW in an angle which was similar to Jerry the King Lawler, and I did saw the Deadlock podcast when they actually talked about Lawler and WWF invading an ECW show. It stated that the lights went out, and when they came back on, Cornette was in the ring, and he began to hit people with a tennis racket. And it stated that during the time, they were going to have a massive angle where Chris Candido reportedly acted as a middleman between Paul Heyman and Cornette to negotiate a deal to bring Cornette in. But Heyman figured that Cornette was the last person anyone would expect to be on the show for ECW, given that two of them were legitimately always hated by each other. It stated that Cornette didn't know if he was going to go, but he wanted to agree that he wanted Heyman to apologize and agree for stipulations, and if he wanted to go, to apologize for the longtime friend of Dennis Coralluzzo for what happened in 1994 due to an NWA title tournament, due to another double cross. With all that being said, they agreed to it. They had their apologies. They had their moments. There was a lot of talks about Cornette when he was also wanted Heyman to apologize and everything else. But after that, they bought them out, and Cornette was the only person that at the time where Caruso and Cornette were in a limousine at the time. Caruso never left his limo at the time before the show, and so he decided to have a meeting with Heyman there. Cornette was the only guy inside the ECW locker room for the brief time before leaving after the angle. It was expected that Cornette will be Lawler's manager for an upcoming show that Lawler worked. But of course, with all this being said, consider this ECW pay-per-view for August. Unfortunately, there are no videos of Cornette's debut on YouTube, but it is on the network for June the 30th, 1997 for the episode of Hardcore TV. If anyone has videos or anything about that, please, I really want to watch it. It's pretty funny. By the way, it stated that during the Cornette angle with Jerry Lawler, where Jerry Lawler hit Tommy Dreamer in the balls with a kendo stick. Wow. For real. Dreamer was legitimately injured and couldn't work the next night. Lawler almost ruptured his balls for real. And Tommy talked about it where in a video of it happening. It was also in an episode of Hardcore TV during when Cornette's angle at the same time. Dude, if anyone has videos of June the 30th, 1997 of an ECW Hardcore TV, please give it to the Deadlock podcast because I really want to watch that video, and I actually want to watch the episode so much because there might be so much craziness going on there. That's crazy. And there's actually video of the nut shot, which I'm not going to watch. You know what? Let me click on this and see what I can find here. There's actually a YouTube video of this.
Well, here we go. I'll tell you a little old school ECW story. Everyone asked me the hardest injury. We had some comedians here. I'll tell you a comedic Tommy Dreamer story. Tom.
Okay, so technically there is nothing. There's no video of the battle. It's just an interview that was made by YouTuber Todd Shapiro Show, which only has 12,000 subscribers. So nothing much there. There's nothing much there. He just talks about Jerry Lawler doing the nut shot on him. We have other reports going on at the time where mostly we have a little bit of interesting report here from the Memphis area of USWA. Tom Pritchard is moving to Memphis, and word is USWA will end up becoming a satellite company to the WWF and will be used as a developmental territory and training location. Dave also mentions offhandedly that USWA is currently being founded by a guy from Cleveland who runs a chain of massage parlor. The WWF deal fell through, and we'll find out all about it in about a year. Jerry Jarrett's mother, Christian Jarrett, was fired by USWA as she had worked the ticket office in Louisville in a literally since the beginning of time. But USWA finally cut ties with her. More news on USWA. Glenn Jacobs, a.k.a. Fake Diesel, the dentist, Isaac Yankem. Do we know more about him? Technically, this is what we know about him. As of right now, Glenn Jacobs is no longer doing the Diesel gimmick in USWA. It states here that he has been working as a gimmick named Doomsday, a guy that's wearing an Old Lord Humongous mask. That's ridiculous. Like that is pretty funny. That it's kind of weird because Fake Diesel was out of the company. Like he was out after the Royal Rumble match in '97 in the entirety. He invented the Kane clothesline and Shotgun Saturday Night episode 2 with Mark Marrow, and how ridiculous that episode was and funny. I saw a spider behind me. But yeah, it is surprising to see that. This is the month of July after all. We're in the month of July. The entirety of the Shawn Michaels and the Undertaker thing would not come around until sometime later. But surprisingly, it is interesting. By the way, it is kind of bad with everything going on here with the professional wrestling world. There's still talks about Mike Tyson and his whole backstage antics and everything else, with WCW planning to bring him out before the surprise. Like I said, 2 nights before the show, and everything else for that going on. The writer of this Observer stated in his opinion, quoted stating, "Man, I gotta disagree with them here. Bischoff bringing Mike Tyson out on TV on Nitro 2 nights after the ear thing would have made major news. And it kind of stinks that a year later, or around the same time in '97, Mike Tyson would actually ditch and go to WWF and be there until the Royal Rumble of '98. So that right there actually stinks for more people. But yeah, with all that being said, it's crazy. Here are some final informations here. They're believing now that Paul Bearer has revealed the Undertaker's big secret, that Bearer accused Undertaker of burning down his parents' house, killing his parents. Now, of course, now the Undertaker is pointing out that his younger brother, that his brother Kane, he called out the murder, that Kane burned down his parents' house by accident, blaming it so much for everything else here, which is kind of crazy. Like I said before, this is actually around the same time where Glenn Jacobs gave up the idea of becoming Diesel. So I think when you actually look at all of this stuff happening all at the same time, it's kind of crazy that they're now talking about the Burn Kane thing here. By the way, Dave Meltzer also pointed out information talking about how most people don't remember at the time when Undertaker first debuted in the WWF. His name was Kane the Undertaker, but they dropped the Kane part after a few matches. So It is crazy that now they're talking about, and by the way, Kane spelled with a C. They also pointed out that they might believe that there would have been a potential storyline that it would have revealed that Mankind was The Undertaker's brother. But considering with so much of Mick Foley's interviews revealing his childhood would have made no sense because Mick Foley at that time was putting out so many gimmicks that it was ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But all in all, surprising. By the way, speaking about Sable and how Sable won a contest and how all the crazy stuff happened, it stated that Sable came out on Raw with a low-cut top, as said before, and stated that revealing yet another boob job. While Mark Merrill acted jealous and tried to block her from camera, Sable needed another boob job like Yokozuna needs more cake and ice cream, so go figure what goes through people's minds, Dave Meltzer said, unquote. That's crazy. Man, crazy enough. Oh, wow. Jim Cornette. Oh, wow. Headhunters are debuting in WWF with manager Jim Cornette. Oh, dang, crazy. That's actually crazy. Shotgun tapings were for dark matches where the Patriot was from All Japan Pro Wrestling made his debut, losing to Rockabilly, known as Billy Gunn, as he didn't really get over with as Sean Morley, who's been wrestling in Puerto Rico and EMML had to a tryout match and later became Val Venus. That's pretty funny. Shotgun Saturday Night fired Brian Pillman as host of the show as the plan was to bring in Paul Heyman to host a WWF event in the show. And they were actually going to send him for a plane ticket to fly the next taping. But the problem is that no one told Heyman, and he had no interest in hosting a show, so he didn't go. Funny. Speaking about Heyman, there seems to have a lot of heat due to various things within the WWF. For starters, Vince McMahon was reportedly furious that Heyman mentioned Nitro and Eric Bischoff. Name of the Raw that there's also still heat over the incident with Rob Van Dam and Vince McMahon because of the incident last week when Van Dam not wanting to put over Jesse James. Heyman had a meeting with McMahon and to discuss all of the various things, and seems like WWF and ECW's relationship is on the rocks a bit. A lot of WWE wrestlers aren't happy about the relationship, either because they feel that ECW guys are being allowed to get over in ways they can't WWF. WWF stars aren't allowed to break tables or jump up off of guardrails and stuff like that. So there's a little peeved that ECW guys are being brought in to Raw and being allowed to do things which is getting them over, while others in WWF are struggling to connect. It's kind of ridiculous, but I can't say much about that. Like, ECW guys are so out of it that you just can't say much about it. These guys are tough, and they're tough. If they want to destroy you, they will. And that's the truth. If New Jack comes in and tries to cut you, if you tell him to cut him, he's going to cut you, depending on how he's going to cut you. But if you tell him you want to throw him over the ring because you just want to get a tiny bit of offense in him, and if he says no, remember, you're a greenhorn. And if I'm a greenhorn, you got another thing coming. Or I got another thing coming, depending on it. By the way, here's the last piece of information. Okay, this part actually made me laugh a little bit. This part made me laugh so much, I had to think to myself, this is stupid. So the last paragraph states here, says here, quote, some guy writes in and talks about the lack of depth in the WWF roster. And specifically talks about knowing it's time to change the channel when he sees guys like Rocky Maivia and Hunter Hearst Helmsley come on TV. Even if they weren't crappy wrestlers or workers, I could deal with them if they had a decent personality. Yeah, who wants to see those uncharismatic dweebs? Lots of ridiculousness in the letters this week, actually. Someone else writes in defending Ric Flair and says that 20 years from now, people will still be talking about how great Flair is, while Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Six, and Eric Bischoff, while be barely remembered footnotes in wrestling history. I really can't say much about that, and just to let you guys know, Rocky Maivia is The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, Hunter Hearst Helmsley is Triple H, the CEO of the company right now. I really can't say that at the time because 1997 was a tough year for them, both guys. I'm not saying it was bad for everyone. Like Rocky Maivia had this horrible problem. He was even though him and Hunter Hearst had their moments, they were wrestling, they were intercontinental champions. And the way their gimmicks were, I can't say it was terrible, but it wasn't meant for being for 1996 or 1997 because when you had the NWO of WCW and ECW trashing out, you know you had to do something. So it's great that The Rock had his change gimmick. He would be part of the Nation just the next year or so on, and how the Nation of Domination became a thing. And the Nation of Domination were turning in big at the time, and The Rock joined in. And Triple H joined out with DX, and they would have their feud with Nation of Domination in a one tag match the year later in '98, and their careers changed, and they went on for champions, corporate champion, and by '99 they were winning champions back and forth. So it started to change over them in time. So when you read this article and talk about what's been going on at the time, yeah, I can say crazy. This is the most wildest. The history they're talking about is pretty surprising for what it is. And before Glenn Jacobs would come back to the WWF to become Kane, that right there would choose history. Like the Attitude Era was just this close. The Attitude Era was this close. That's crazy. All right, so in other news, speaking about Mike Tyson, since the ear bite with Evander Holyfield has been tough enough, 1997 has been a tough year when Lennox Lewis defeated Oliver McCall in a rematch where Oliver McCall ran out to the ring, and it seemed like he was jogging out of the ring because he was doing an important mission before something bad was going to happen, and it did. He broke out in disgust, but during coming in after 2 rounds when they had a tough fight against each other for the vacant WBC belt, during the time when Mike Tyson vacated the belt, the same night where Bruce Seldon decided to take a dive, but some people believe that he didn't take a dive, but the fans were booing a dive, the same night where Tupac Shakur got shot by someone and died 6 nights later when he was in a coma, decided that during the time, McCall broke out and cried due to the outside problems that he's been having outside of the ring. And after a couple rounds, and ever since he was walking out to the ring during the end of round 3, he decided to not go to his corner from round 3 or even during the mids of round 4 and 5. But they let him to continue the fight until round 5. Mills Lane stopped the fight for the safety of it, making this the first and only pro defeat by knockout in Oliver McCall's career, considering he never got knocked out in his career, even as of right now, since last year ago during his last fight. Luckily, nothing has been coming up for him since, but for Lennox Lewis, him winning this title might have been a lot better, but still, you can't say that this wasn't as better than him taking the WBC belt out of a trash can a few years ago back in '93 after Bo vacated it in a trash can. It was also around the time where Riddick Bowe decided to step out of boxing since Andrew Gloat got him to win 2 fights by disqualification by low blow, with the first one being involved due to a riot in Madison Square Garden. with him being in the fight winning. Andrew was about to win the fight coming into the end of the 9th round in a 10-round fight, but low blowed again, and before the end of round 9, where he was winning the fight easily, the referee stopped the fight legit, and it was a legit stoppage. With all this being said, and with Tyson's win against Frank Bruno might have been tough enough for Frank Bruno's retirement, and with Bruce Seldon and the entirety of the breakout, and now Mike Tyson, the entirety of 1996 and 1997 has been a horrible year for heavyweight boxing, and it's about to get worse. With Andrew Gloat would come out against Lewis during the late of 1997 after his 2 DQs, only to suffer a pro defeat in the first round, making it the waste of time for boxing. While the WBO belt might have been the only time in 1997 where all fights were doing okay for themselves, and considering with IBO champion Brian Nielsen taking on a bunch of nobodies and then defending titles against people that were past their prime, I can't say that those titles were actually terrible other than forgotten. And with Herbie Hyde trying his best, considering his win against Tony Tucker during June of a couple weeks ago, during around the same time due to the ear bite, and with Mills Lane actually warning Tyson for the ear bite, decided to go back to Vegas to ref another fight with Akiwande and Lewis around the time, after reffing 2 horrible performance fights this year. And considering with Herbie Hyde defeating former champion Tony Tucker on June the 28th, which might have been the best fight considering it only lasted 2 rounds by knockout, and with the IBO belt being involved as nothing much than just a forgotten belt in time, but considering with all that being said with Brian Nielsen taking on guys like Phil Jackson and guys like Mike Hunter, wasn't that much entertaining for 96. Even though in January his win against Larry Holmes was actually a close 12-round fight, even though it ended in controversy, it's not the controversy that's terrible than the Seldon Tyson, the Galata and Bowe fights, the McCall and Lewis 2 fight, or the Holyfield and Tyson 2 fight, or even the fight we're about to review right now. Even for Brian Nielsen, he had to take on a guy that was taking on nobodies in his 41 pro fights in November of 97, and that was a complete waste of time. So, yeah, technically, there was nothing entertainingly good to talk about for boxing back in the day. It just goes to show you that they were in a pickle here, because it just seemed like there were so much problems going on in boxing that it seemed like no one had an opportunity to do anything other than brace for the inevitable. So it just goes to show you that there were so many problems going on in boxing at the time that with all of this stuff going on from professional wrestling, has been terrible ever since. So it just goes to show you how tough it is to have a life in professional boxing when you're trying to put yourself in a situation. It's not good. As for news for UFC at the time, considering UFC has been holding out their events, UFC already found out multiple shows going on ever since. Since UFC 12 in Judgment, due to everything going on, with grade on victories from tournaments, tournament brackets and everything has been going slowly as they decided to host out 2 tournaments for semifinal tournaments at the time. While in UFC 13, same thing, only it was for ranking for who would be favored to take on the number 1 ranked fighter in the division. And considering last May, due to when Ortiz lost against Guy Mezger, and around the time, Ortiz was replaced by a guy named Inoue, who at the time was actually unable to continue due to a knee injury during to the tournament finals and everything else, and was showing up fights at the time. Nothing about the show was talked about other than they were pointing out the appearances, as they first appearance the 2 UFC champion Hall of Famers of Randy Coucher and Tito Ortiz. Randy Couture at the time already was about to make out a debut in his career in the world of UFC, when at the time he actually took on Tony Halmy, who would actually be known as professional wrestler at the time, we already know, Ludwig Borga, the guy that defeated Tatanka and became the undefeated record that defeated it. Even though he still has an undefeated record in pro wrestling as a singles wrestler, again, that right there is also shocking because Tony Halmy, as Ludwig Borga, would also have controversies in his career until 2010 and a lot of problems we do not want to talk about as we speak. Considering Randy Couture is a legend, being a first fighter would be a pro wrestler for all people is shocking enough. July the 27th, they will have UFC 14 for a showdown where they're only going to have a couple more tournament fights for middleweight tournament brackets and heavyweight tournaments for the best. And considering whoever the winner will be, they also have UFC heavyweight champion Mark Coleman to actually take on Maurice Smith for the title. So whoever wins the title is the champion. And even though they are scheduling it, and at the time, keep this in mind, it's still a one-round fight. UFC would still schedule one-round fights at the time. So at the time, UFC was still slowly creeping in at the time as handling these events out as best they could. But all in all, I can't say that it was that much of a waste of time, but again, they had their moments, and considering 1997, they're still hosting some events, but it's not what it was back in 93 or 94, and I think by 95, it was a hard thing for me to change looking back at. So, yeah, the UFC world has been changing since. Crazy. Anyway, let's get down to business. Let's talk about it. So, July the 12th, 1997, the satellite of Nevada, Caesars Tahoe, Dino Duva of Duva Boxing with matchmaker Carl Moretti, Inspector Mark Ratner, and doctors Craig Gudmundsen, Joseph Helflin, and James McLennan as doctors of the show for the Nevada State Athletic Commission are here to put out some decent performances as best they could. So the 6 fights on the show have been interesting enough, and considering I try my best to find all the boxing shows and put together a great work of art as best I could, and considering with all this being said, it was hard for me to try to pay attention to all the information here as best I could. So the first fight, of course, this might be a dark match. I don't think these fights were taped, but they might not be on YouTube, unfortunately, which kind of stinks. So a Denmark boxer at the time, which 2 Denmark boxers, undefeated heavyweight fighter 1-0 Glenn Liachetti defeated Richard Davies by a first-round TKO. With a great victory at the time, was actually a great victory, and actually he would actually retire sometime later with one more fight, unfortunately. He would never fight again since. But you can't say there were some fighters on the show that wanted to go over, and they did. But unfortunately, this guy never did. But at least he retired with a healthy body, so that's good. Now, just to let you guys know, I don't know which match was in order. I don't know if this was the first match on the show or this was the second match on the show, so bear with me. Anyway, so the first match on the show I'm going to talk about, Joel Casamero versus Salvador Montes, comes in, and with referee Vic Draculich, who did ref the first match we just talked about, Casamero is 6-0, taking on 7-3-2 Salvador. Mostly both guys are in their 20s, 5'7", and the height didn't really matter. The 4 round fight for the lightweight fight was tough enough to understand. Salvador in red trunks and Joel in white trunks at the time. The fight was pretty interesting. And when I say interesting, I say really interesting because Salvador is an orthodox fighter and Joel was a southpaw fighter. And the first round of the fight was pretty interesting, where Salvador was actually going straight in. He was being the aggressor of the first round. He was actually throwing in punches, pushing. He once pushed Joe Casimiro to the ropes, but Joe got out of the way as quick as he could. And he put on a good effort. He started swinging punches and clinching and grabbing onto Joe's arm and get him out of the way. And Vic was doing an okay job reffing the fight as best he could. And the first round of the fight started out great until he started throwing a left and an uppercut missed by Salvador and Joel. Before that, Joe started to throw some jab punches cleanly in the fight. Like, Salvador was the aggressor in the first round. He really was. But, of course, Joel started to just go in there and land perfect clean punches. And technically, the first round was won easily, decisively by... Well, I wouldn't say decisively. It was a close round that I almost thought it was a tough round for me. But I believe Joel won the round clearly. But depending on that, it was a pretty good start. Of course, Salvador might have not been that good of a boxer, but he went in there, started punching. He sometimes goes for a 1-2 hook here, there. And then, of course, Joe started ducking and then goes straight in, forward, and then backs away where Salvador throws another right. So it wasn't a boring match for all time's sake. There was a moment in 25 seconds where Salvador goes forward, and then out of nowhere, Joe throws a wild uppercut right to his trunks of his leg, way down low, and Vic gave a huge warning for that. Ridiculous. But, of course, with all that being said, the fight was aggressive. It wasn't bad. And even though Lou Duva, at the time, Lou Duva already recovered from his attack from the brawl from the Madison Square Garden fight with Andrew Gloat and the Riddick Bowe 1 fight, and he was the only guy being carried out in a stretcher, was there at the time. So good with them. Also, with everything going on, it seemed like nothing was going at his way. Joel was a good fighter. He went into the fight, and Salvador did the best he could to try throw some heavy punches. Both of them were being aggressors in the second round. Like, Salvador grabs on to headlock Joel's right arm to hold him back and then hold on to him as best he could. Come in to punch just to have Vic break up the clinch. Give a warning there. Salvador was aggressive and he was an over-offensive player, but you can see that Joe Casimiro was that good. Joe is a pretty good fighter. And looking at this in his early career, and this is his 7th pro fight, I was really entertained by his performance here. And even though he had to recover from Salvador grabbing onto him, throwing out, going clinches here or there, and even though Salvador might have not been good with offensive work, and he sometimes tries to go forward, throw punches here or there, and then Joe can sometimes, he can start straight rifing to the right, sometimes a straight lefting, he was strafing pretty well in the fight. And of course, Salvador was putting in a good work against him. Until 1 minute and 13 seconds left of the second round, he comes in, throws a right, misses, and then gets pushed. He goes forward to throw a left body punch, and of course, he tried to block out with his right arm to protect his head, but surprisingly, Joe found the mark and went past his right arm and connected a left punch, sending Salvador down to the canvas. He gets back up to the count of 6. Referee tells if he's all right to continue, but no. Casimiro comes in, throws out another left. Salvador tries to throw a right, but another left on for Joel, sends Salvador down. Referee waves the fight at 2 minutes and 15 seconds. It was a victory nonetheless. It was actually a pretty good victory for Joel. This was actually a great victory for him. Even though he had some other victories in 96, which were knockouts and such. But again, with all that being said, his other victory last May against Raul Munoz, who was an 8-0 fighter, and that went stoppage in the first round, was another damn good fight as well. All in all, he would continue winning against tougher opponents and journeyman fighters in 97 and 98 and take on Miguel Figueroa, who was supposed to be a promising contender at the time in 98. And, well, of course, there's more talks about that guy and other fights I am curious to know about in the future, which includes his fight with Andre Berto, but let's not get to that. But yeah, good win for Joel. He got the victory and somewhat of a promising contender in boxing. So it was a good fight. Good fight for what it was. Fernando Vargas versus Eugene Lopez was another fight which was interesting because I tried to look up videos as best I could. Unfortunately, I managed to find a highlight video which was 35 seconds long. But of course, the fight lasted 1 minute 42 seconds in the first round by KO. Eugene was a 5-5 fighter, and Fernando Vargas, this was his 5th pro fight in his career. He's another young blood guy. But it's kind of crazy because, with all that being said, Eugene only had 1 knockout in his career. Fernando, all knockouts. Even though Vargas was a 19-year-old kid, he was 5'10". Eugene Lopez was 5'2". The height difference was ridiculous. The height was so ridiculous. 5'10" to 5'2". And by the way, this was a welterweight fight. 6-round welterweight fight we're talking about here. So Fernando Vargas being a really tall dude with gold trunks while Eugene in black trunks was crazy. Of course, Fernando, there were times that he tried to throw jabs in the downstairs, but of course, Fernando, he was throwing on jabs. He was going under him. He was landing on, ducking punches, and Lopez was going for body punches because he was tall. There was a clinch at 1 minute, and then, of course, Lopez threw the free punch to his equilibrium again a few times when clinching him. I don't know who the referee's name was because it doesn't show in BoxRec. But of course, the fight wouldn't last very long. Of course, Lopez did try to throw some body punches and other stuff against Fernando. But with only 1 minute 43 seconds of the fight, he started to attack him, and Lopez was ducking down as lightly as he could. Lopez threw a wild Deontay Wilder punch, and then Fernando managed to land out a couple good crosses and sending him down to the canvas. The referee went on to stop on the fight at 1 minute 42 seconds to give Fernando the win. Fernando Vargas, I will say this fight might have not been his good performance, but considering that he would go on in 97 to take on a 7-2 fight, a 7-1 and a 9-2 fighter to win other fights at the time. Surprisingly, he would become champion in 98. As for Joe Casamaro, Joe Casamaro would not have that opportunity to become champion until the time was ready to come. He would have his first 12-round fight against David Santos in November the 20th, 1999, which was his first 12-round fight. I'm just going to double check if that was the WBA. Nope, that was not a WBA belt. Technically, he would only become super featherweight champion until May the 21st, 2021. May the 21st, 2000, where after defeating John Kwang Baek, so pretty much, he would go on to become another champion against Diego Corrales, and that whole wildness happened. But of course, David Diaz ended it in 2007 for him. Casamaro might not have much of a career, just like Fernando Vargas, but with Fernando Vargas and how his career went on, and considering him and Casamaro would go on to lose fights in their career, but they would go on to win a couple titles in their career, as a couple title reigns, but again, it's great to see their young career and how they look like. And it's great that Fernando still had that hair switch to his blondness, but he still had the dark parts here. So I do remember that. Definitely. All in all, not bad. Brian Nielsen versus I'll be honest though, Brian Nielsen versus Marcus. This fight was just a non-title fight, another title fight, which was just nothing to talk about. A 4-round fight went on as nothing before. All we can say about this was just ridiculousness. But again, there were a lot of wild talks here. With everything going on here, Brian Nielsen is coming into the ring as a tough fighter with 20 knockouts in his 35 wins, while Marcus was 17, 10-1, and his knockout ratio, his knockouts in his career, which don't get me wrong, like he does have a record of 15 knockouts at the time, and he would win one more fight in his career with 18 wins and 16 knockouts, but his losing strategy totals at 17 and 15 of those defeats by knockout. So yeah, the fight went on as nothing expected. Brian Nielsen went on and to jab on the fight. Again, Nielsen was 254 pounds coming into the fight, and Marcus at 219. The thing was, Marcus was 6'1" with Nielsen at 6'3". I can't say much about the performance of Brian because Brian was getting jabbed by Marcus easily, and he did got a cross hit on him at one point. And there were times that Nielsen was going forward. Like there was a time at 45 seconds he goes forward with a punch here, jab, and then another swing here, and then he almost loses his balance while he backs forward. So yeah, looking at Nielsen here and seeing his performance was tough enough. And by the way, I'm going to skip through this fight, and I'm going to skip through the second last fight of the show, which was a 10-round fight, but except for that. But again, the fight, I can't say much about it. Everyone else, like, you do look at this fight and you do see it. Like, there are moments where Nielsen did handle to do an okay hook body shot, and then cross here, and then an uppercut here, landing on Marcus. So I wouldn't say that his new ideal, his skills, and his punching was terrible. But again, as a fighter, I can tell that he gets tired pretty much. And I think if you can handle him from getting punched out, you can win the fight. So it's not terrible. In the second round, he did have moments where he had a punch 1, 2, and then a 3 punch combination right to his right thigh. And of course, referee Vic Draculich warned him for that. And then seconds later, he threw a here, downstairs, low blow again, and another cross. And Vic warns him again for a body punch by getting him a low blow again. And of course, they did call time. The action resumes. And it's crazy. So now we're looking at this, and even though the announcers point out how Nielsen's doing a nice job landing on punches with great jabs, with nice overhand rights and such, and yeah, he is doing that, but again, it just goes to show you there is moments of damage from Gonzalez. There is times that he's throwing punches and landing good punches on Nielsen. So Nielsen's defense work might not be that good, but his 35 victories are not all bullcrap. I do call him a -C level fighter, better than a D fighter. But again, I wouldn't really say that his entire performance was that good. Like, he had to recover and put himself together as best he could. And there were talks that there might have been a chance that something might happen. They did follow up the uppercut and everything else. People, I'm sure there's some people out there thinking, oh, great, we're going to have another Galato and Riddick Bowe incident going on here again. And people are expecting to just end this fight before it gets worse. Again, that's what we get here. We get grabs, holds sometimes. But again, Nielsen tries his best to get the job done. Again, before coming into the end of the third round with 20 seconds left, we get a huge uppercut downstairs by Nielsen. And I'm sure Vic actually warned him again. And the crowd started to boo for some reason. And when I heard the crowd booing, it was like, oh no. And then that's when I'm thinking to myself, is this how Brian Nielsen's career in the USA ended? Because it just seemed like that's what we were getting. Hearing the crowd boo was crazy. Again, we come to the fourth round. Marcus does try to land a good, huge left hook. And then seconds later, Nielsen is holding himself like this, standing still like a statue, and Marcus just takes a free jab at him, which is like, why? And again, the announcers point out how much of an active fighter Nielsen is. While Nielsen is holding himself together, he decides to end it all with a bunch of power going on. Marcus throws a couple good straight jabs, hooks here or there. Nielsen tries to throw a power punch, misses at 1 minute 35 seconds left of the round, and then lands some other punches. Marcus comes back to attack him again. And then he throws out multitude of slow barrage punches. Marcus trying to throw out upstairs and downstairs, and then Nielsen decides to throw some wild barrage of cuts, uppercuts, hooks, crosses, every single punch that can hurt Marcus. He pushes him out to the corner. Vic Draculich stops the fight at 2 minutes and 14 seconds of the fourth round, giving Nielsen his 36th victory. But unfortunately, this would be his last fight in the USA. The announcer stated that he captured his 35th victory and his 23rd knockout. 23rd? 23rd or something? And proves to 20 knockouts, which is kind of ridiculous because that makes no sense. Because this is his 36th victory, not his 35th. So, I guess error there. But yeah. All in all, they brought the victory. It was a good win. And that's that. Finally, we have the last fight to talk about before we get to the show here. Justin Juco, who is known for taking on Floyd Mayweather and not in a good way in his career, would take on a guy named George Luis Lopez. Of course, nothing much about this 10-round fight. The entire fight, I'm not going to talk about. Justin Juco, who is actually from the country of Uganda, has had a lot of problems in his career, and with 28 wins, 1 defeat, 1 draw, 23 knockouts, Lopez 17-5-1, when in BoxRec says he's 18-5-1. All I can say about the fight is nothing much could happen other than Juco in black trunks, silver gray for George. The fight was just a decency of dangerous punching. There were clinches and other stuff going on in the fight. Justin had some decencies in this fight as well. He was a decent fighter. But again, I wouldn't say he deserved a lot of it. There were good times in the fight for anyone to win the fight and do this or that. Considering George wasn't doing much of a lot in the fight, which, with all due to respect, again, Justin had his moments, but again, with a lot of cuts going on, there was a lot of practice that he had to learn. He was trying his best to handle himself in the fight as best he could, while everything going on. George was putting in a wild performance against him, and just to let you guys know, this entire show is based on knockouts after knockouts after knockouts with great contenders and great fighters on the show. Justin, even though he won this fight in the 9th round by knockout with referee Norm Budin was part of the fight of the referee, I can't say that it was that boring of a fight. Both guys orthodox and handled themselves in a dangerous situation by putting themselves in a situation. They managed to put out some okay assortments here and everything else in the entire fight. But of course, Justin doing an okay job, throwing jabs, landing out body punches, and Marcus was just in the fight as best he could to just ward out some of the offensive of Justin here. The fight was dominant from start to finish, and even by coming into the end of the 6th round, Marcus's face is bruising up, everything else. Yes, he is dodging, doing this or that, still dodging punches, and there are times that there were misses here or there and some jabs here or there in the middle. These guys were trading punches, don't get me wrong. So it wasn't a boring fight for all due to respect. But again, the fight would be too long that I would have to write notes so much about what I talked about and what this or that happened, and I'm not going to talk about that. So of course, coming into round 7 or 8, since both guys are already getting tired, coming into the front stretch for the championship rounds, the entire fight was just so dirty. And I'm not saying it's a dirty fight or a clinch fight. It was just fighters were landing combination punches. They were trading punches. They were doing a decent job making a great, entertaining fight out of it. With Justin and mostly his face being somewhat bruised up, I wasn't seeing a lot of cuts or bruises against both fighters before coming into the 9th round, so it wasn't like anyone around here in the arena were doing a bad job. I just felt like that there wasn't a lot of entertainment into this fight because we don't know much about these two. And even though Justin Junko was a longtime fighter, just like Brian Nielsen, and Fernando Vargas and Joe Casamero were just new fighters that I got used to. And I know who those guys were. While Justin, I only barely know him because of the Floyd Mayweather and the Diego Corrales fight just a few years later, where he lost against Mayweather, lost against Corrales, and then both of those two guys fought each other, and Corrales never became the same man again after Mayweather defeated him. But anyway, as for Justin, this fight had moments. George was coming out with jabs at the end of the fight. The 9th round comes to an end where in the minute of the fight, George misses a right. And of course, Justin just comes in with a heavy, monstrous right where he misses, but then does come in to connect a pushover from a left, and then throws out multiple punch combinations, backs up George, and he hits the canvas, and the referee stops the fight before even counting, when counting the 5 or 6, he just stops the fight and waves it at 1 minute 33 seconds. Or maybe someone threw it in a towel. I think someone threw in a towel, actually. But again, Justin picks up his 29th victory here. George gets back up, spanks the ropes for upset. Again, there's nothing much you can say about this. But again, as for Justin's career, he would take on a guy named Antonio Hernandez, which would actually suffer another defeat in his career, which would also be 3 months later. He would take on Mayweather for the WBC World Super Featherweight Champion, take on IBA Super Featherweight title fight against Diego Corrales, and then lose against other fighters that he lost against. Fighters like Ernesto Zepeda, Carlos Hernandez, Miguel Cotto, who was 9-0 back in 2002, WBU Super Featherweight Champion Michael Gomez, promising contender Armanda Cruz, and then fought for IBA World Lightweight title in 2008 against a guy named Rustman Nugaev, and then fought for the GBU super lightweight champion against 27-0 Gabor Vito in 2012, which was a second round knockout defeat. And then a year later in 2013, retired for good with one more pro defeat. So again, I really can't say much about Justin's boxing career at this moment because, again, I don't know much about his career as much other than his pro defeats, but I can almost say that even though he had a bunch of minor weight title fights in his career, and he was taking on contenders in his career, but again, it is what it is. He went in there and just took it like never before. And I got to just say it is what it is. So all in all, it is what it is. That's all I can say. It is what it is when it comes to those type of reasons in boxing. Anyway, Lennox Lewis versus Henry Akinwande for the WBC World Heavyweight Champion. Yeah. So Henry Akinwande vacates the belt after his last victory, which was a boring 12-round fight in January against Scott Welch, which was another boring fight, known for having clinches and fights with Alexander Zolkin and Jeremy Williams. His WBO title win was horrible. His career was so boring, and it stated that they were stating that it was a great way to stop the win. So George Foreman is in the ring and everything else going on. The fighters are having talks about, do they have what it takes for Lewis to take on Henry Akinwande? They even show footage of the bewildering career of Lewis, talking about everything about his career, how he's proven to dominate the sport, showing us footages and his fight and how he once lacked against a fight against Oliver McCall in their first fight. Emmanuel Stewart is already putting out reasons to give credit to Lewis and helping him out in his career at this moment, and believe a great fight. There's also talks about, because Jim Lampy and George Foreman did point out, does Henry Akinwande have a chance to win a fight? Is he a dangerous threat? And they do talk about that, this guy is a person that does like holding, but no doubt about it, he is a dangerous fighter, and he will give Lewis a hard time. So pretty much I can't say much about it. By the way, they even talk about Lewis and how seeing the corner, like listening to Lennox Lewis talk about the fight with him and Oliver McCall too, and how crazy it was, and how shocking that fight ended up to be, was a shock. Seeing the whimper, him winning the title a second time, and he wanted to win the belt, and especially with a good knockout, but still, yeah, there were talks about that going on. So now Larry Merchant, everyone are just having talks so much about what they're seeing here, talking about their opponents, how Akinwande might have a chance, taking on a smaller fighter, the defense, everything else. But yeah, with all that being said, they do have an idea that Akinwande might have an opportunity. Both of these guys are British. Akinwande is into his career with his average punching abilities in his last fights. So with all that being said, he does enter the ring with wearing on with black trunks. And of course, with referees and judges. Referee Mills Lane would be involved in this show. Darby Shirley, Terry Smith, Larry O'Connell would be the judges. Darby Shirley, I don't know what his judging was, but man, ridiculous. So, yeah, what do we have to say about the fight? Well, the fight starts out not good. It just starts out with them throwing down punches and then gets the clinches. And 18 seconds into the fight, Lennox Lewis is throwing punches to Akinwande's back while he's clinching in the bottom of him. So at this moment, Lennox comes in, attacks him. He gets clinched on, and Akinwande throws wild punches to the back of Lewis's head. And at this moment, we just want to see a fight that's not BS. We get the clinch. Akinwande does a 180 to clinch him to the rope. We get the clinch. We are getting clinches after clinches. And if you're counting how many clinches are in a fight, we count a total of over 50 clinches in 5 rounds. Here's the thing. Every time you get a clinch, you get a clinch. When Lewis tries to go for the attack, Akinwande clinches. It's the worst fight ever. And then we come to the second round of the fight where, out of nowhere, we get warned. Mills Lane is warning him for the clinches. And again, multitude of clinches coming out one by one. Again, it's ridiculous. And with only 1 minute into the second round, Mills times him out to give him out a 1-point abduction. He deducts him 1 point, and then moments later, we're getting more clinches. Akinwande is pushing out Lewis to the ropes and throwing more punches at him for clinches. He clinches him back to the rope again seconds later, and Mills Lane is trying to grab onto him. And it's so ridiculous. And it's ridiculous. So, again, he times the fight. He brings Akinwande to his corner, telling his trainer to make a fight out of it. Make a fight about it. Do better in it. Like, he has to make a fight out of it. Like, Akinwande is 32-0 with 1 draw. Lewis, 30-1, 0 draws. He finally goes for the attack and everything else, but Akinwande is onto the circular motion. The thing is, Akinwande wants to throw punches, but Lewis goes forward, he attacks him and clinches him. It's so terrible that it's just not good. And every time Akinwande tries to throw a punch, when he does, Lewis goes forward. Like, every time he does it, like 8 seconds after the second round, he's going for punches and Lewis attacks him back. They go for clinches. It's ridiculous. And by the way, they look up all the punching statistics, and it's kind of crazy because the second round was pretty close. And I gave some similarities to the second round because I would have almost thought maybe it was a close round for anyone, but again, I really can't say much about it. Like, I almost gave it to Akinwande, but it was definitely almost a round for Lewis. So I gave it a 10-8. If it was Akinwande, it would have been 9-9 because of the point abduction, but still, nothing could be said. So at this moment, the entire fight is turning into a mess. Every time Akinwande tries to throw a punch, he goes forward, and sometimes Lewis goes forward as well. That's the problem. Both of these guys are going forward. When they go for a punch, uppercut, it doesn't matter. They grab the arm, they hug each other, they hold, they're laying on each other. That's all you're getting. And there was one moment in the fight where Larry Merchant stated that Mills Lane looks like an Oreo cookie mixed like Mills Lane looks like an Oreo cookie mixed with two bones. I don't know what Larry Merchant said, but it was ridiculous. Calling Mills Lane an Oreo cookie. Oh, it's ridiculous. It would have been funny if Akinwande was, well, he was in black trunks, but it would have been funny if Lewis was also in black trunks. But no, he's in white trunks, by the way. But man, oh, it's ridiculous. Oh boy. Oh, okay, we're almost done. Okay, let's just finish this. Okay, so after the end of round 3, we come into round 4. Everything is turning into a tragedy. Akinwande is barely landing a few punches in each round. Like round 2 might have been his better round, and round 1, but at this moment he doesn't want to throw any more punches. They do show us replay of Akinwande trying to throw a jab, and then he throws this disgusting, I think he was doing a hammer punch. He goes left, and then boom, and then hams to Lewis. And they do show us a top-down angle that showed Lewis touching the glove of the canvas in that round, but they don't count it as a knockout, so I don't know about that. But again, the third round, nothing much. And again, the fourth round, again, nothing much. By the way, Letterman's scorecard actually gave Akinwande round 10. Why did you give him round 10? I don't know, because I guess he thought the knockout by that hammer punch was counted for a knockout. I don't know. Akinwande was aggressing it, but I really believe Lewis, the third round wasn't a good round, better round for Lewis, but again, he was landing clear punches I saw, so I don't know what they saw. I don't know. As for round 4, it was crazy. So with 40 seconds into the round, Mills Lane is trying to push them together, and of course, as he finally lets go, he does shove Lewis right to one of the corner ropes and almost stumbles to the ropes, which was kind of scary because a year later, Bernard Hopkins would also get shoved in by Mills Lane due to the Robert Allen fight a year later and how that became horrible. But Mills Lane is trying his best to make a fight out of it and trying to stop the clinching. So, yeah, again, Mills Lane is doing his best. And by the way, again, it seems like Lewis is trying to win this fight by disqualification, because 1 minute and 43 seconds left of the fourth round, he's going forward, he sees Akinwande, he dodges a punch in the last second as Akinwande throws a perfect left punch, and both go forward to butt each other in the elbow and clinch again. What is going on here? They can't do nothing. They're killing 8, 10, and 12 seconds of the round in each of the round for the clinches, which is what the announcer said. Again, you're seeing two guys that are over 6 feet, 6 inches tall, for crying out loud, and it's not a good fight. It's not a good fight. People want to make a fight out of this, but again, 6'7" Akinwande, 6'5" Lewis. It's ridiculous. So he even forces out Akinwande. He warns him with 45 seconds left of the fourth round. He's finally timing the fight, telling to Akinwande to make a fight out of it. He's still clinching him. And then we go to the fifth round. It's so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. Even when Akinwande tries to throw a punch, Lewis tries to attack him, he goes forward, and Akinwande goes... Again, it's so terrible. And the fifth round just makes it worse. When he finally stops the bullcrap. After 1.5 minutes of horrible waste of time of clinches, he times the fight. He goes to Akinwande's corner. He's out. He even deducted him a point in that round as well. He goes up to Don Turner and tells him he clinches the next time he's gone. And again, Don Turner is telling him, don't let him disqualify you. Drop the man. You got it. Do the fight. Fight him back. Get him. Again, when you see a guy like Lewis going forward at him and throwing punches and going forward at him, what are you supposed to do in that situation? That's something that Akinwande isn't that much into her. And I think that's the problem with the fight. Both guys go forward, but they're clinchers. And that is the problem of this fight. And when you see that, it's just terrible. So with 47 seconds left of the fifth round, Lewis tries to throw a right uppercut to end it, headbutts one of the nipples of Akinwande, and then now they're clinching, grabbing, everything else. And then Jim Lampe, out of nowhere, states another fight, utterly confused. He goes, quote, 366 days ago, July 11th, 1996, Gallardo disqualifies by Bo for low blow. 366 days ago. And then again, this or that. He talks about this. He talks about that. Mills times the fight. He tells Akinwande to go that way, go that way. He points at him multiple times to get the heck out of here, out the dang fight. That's it. We're talking about a fourth major disqualification in the last 366 days, for crying out loud. And he's not wrong. Jim Lampy's not wrong. 366 days, another disqualification, 2 of them in title fights, all of them in controversy with low blows twice, ear bite, and now this. This is what the heavyweight division was in 1996 and 1997. A guy takes a dive the same night where Tupac died 6 nights ago. Andrew Gloat comes back, knocked out, lost against Lewis. Larry Holmes loses against Brian Nielsen in a controversial way. Boring fight with Akinwande and a Scott Welch fight. This is what boxing was in that time. Like, we want to find new faces and new this and new that, but it's crazy. And by the way, Larry Merchant points out to tell everyone to give Mills Lane a gold crown for trying his best to make this fight happen and tried to make the fight entertaining and tried to make this fight legit and not bullcrap. Because Merchant points out that he was in an almost impossible situation after 2 weeks ago with the Tyson and Holyfield fight. And he comes out and refs this fight, reffing out the fight with McCall and Lewis. Like, Mills Lane is in the middle of all of this bullcrap, and he's the only person doing a good job. This is like watching New Blood Rising in 2000 of WCW, where you have Scott Steiner, Kevin Nash, and Goldberg in a match, and Goldberg's plan, like Goldberg's entirety of the match, that he's going to walk off because he doesn't want to take the power bomb on Kevin Nash to lose because he's a crybaby, and they want the announcers because Vince Russo, thanks to us people 5 years ago, and just to let you guys know, internet was made in Windows 95, so we're only a couple years into this whole thing where internet is still new. 5 years into it in 2000, Vince Russo was like, oh bro, if we can speak in their own language for the fans thinking that we know wrestling's fake, maybe we might talk into them so they might like wrestling. What was Vince Russo thinking? Oh yeah, if the powerbomb wasn't the match's design, what are they going to do now? Improvise? And you have Scott Steiner in the middle of all that bullcrap, and he's trying to have himself a good match, and all of this waste of time is going on. What is going on in the world today? Mills Lane is like Scott Steiner. He's trying to have a chance to put in a good boxing match and make things fair, and all this bullcrap is happening in front of him in the entirety of 1997. It's so ridiculous on how Mills Lane did everything. Mills Lane does go into commentary, Henry Akinwande does get to talk on commentary, talking about this or that and how they go forward, this or that, and they couldn't stop clinching from going forward. It's ridiculous. And speaking about ridiculous, Letterman gave round 3 to Akinwande. Dobby Shirley gave round 1 and 4 to Akinwande in the fight. Right. Whatever you say. Me, I give it 40-35. It didn't matter. Again, Lewis tries his best to be in the interview with Larry Merchant, trying to make something of a deal out of it. But again, with everything going on, with the aggressiveness and everything else, I can't say much about this for Lennox Lewis because at the end of the day, I can't blame him for having these fights, taking on a guy months later, which would end in a guy first round knockout against a guy that low blowed Riddick Bowe. And I'm sure we wanted to see Riddick Bowe take on Lewis for the heck of it. And because of what happened to Bo in 96 and how he didn't feel good at the time after his Holyfield win in his trilogy, yeah, it was tough. As for Mills Lane would go on to continue reffing another fight a month later for an IBA World Light Heavyweight fight with Jose Luis Rivera taking on Rocky Gannon. And then he would ref on the fight with Terry Norris versus Joaquin Vasquez in Missouri in August, days later on August the 8th. And of course, without even hesitation, he would go on in 97 with other, like from Continental champions, Abded Sullivan versus Garen Lane in August. He was reffing fights from September, from one fight from Juan Manuel Marquez for the WBA and NABO fight, and doing the Bronco McCart versus Eric Holland fight for the IBA Super Welterweight fight. And even with fighters he was reffing on that were nobody fights. It's ridiculous that he continued doing it. And he continued doing it in 98, reffing out multiple fights with Tim Austin in the Adrian Casperia fight. And again, the Bernard Hopkins versus Robert Allen fight, which was a no contest, which was accidental for Mills Lane because he was trying to break up a clinch there. Yeah, ridiculous, huh? And that would be the last title fight he would ever ref. And because a day later, he goes to Reno, Nevada to ref a 4-round fight, which was a knockout. And then he would ref a fight with Thomas Hearns versus Jay Snyder months later on November the 6th, 98, with a first-round knockout win with Thomas Hearns, which that fight also occurred to be a rare double knockdown at the fight, which is kind of surprising, which was a first-round knockout for Hearns, but they ended in a double knockout, a rare double knockout. And that was the end for Mills Lane. Mills Lane never did nothing else again. He went on to become a judge in TV. He helped Stone Cold Steve Austin for that legally binding contract after the corporation thing happened, which was the same night where Undertaker hit Austin with a shovel. And then send him out to the hospital after a house show and then try to bury him and embalm him. Yeah. And of course, unfortunately, Mills Lane would pass away in December the 6th, 2022 at the age of 85. All in all, even though Mills Lane did suffer a stroke, and which left him in ringside paralyzed in a virtual when he was unable to speak after he was involved. To be honest, Mills Lane quit refereeing in 1998, a year later. He did become a promoter at one point, but that was it. But again, for whatever happened to him in 2002, it is what it is. At the end of the day, we're going to count him as a legend in the sport because at the end of the day, it is what it is. So yeah, that's the end of the entirety there. And even though Larry Merchant and Mills Lane had their own talks about the fight and what happened 2 weeks ago and this or that, but again, I think with all this stuff going on in today's world, it's crazy. I will say, though, there is one more thing I like to talk about before I end this episode, and I know it's been over an hour and 43 minutes here, but I just got to talk about this. So, Larry Merchant goes up to Mills Lane after he interviewed Akewande for that entire thing, and after the Lewis thing, he goes up to Mills Lane and tells him, Mills, after what happened 2 weeks ago, how's it feel like to stop another championship fight by DQ? And Mills Lane says, quote, yeah, it is, Larry. It's the worst thing. A DQ is the worst thing. But there's a certain protocol, and once you get outside of it, there's nothing else she can do. There's nothing else you can do. Pretty much. And Larry says, do you warn them early about all the clinching and everything you saw? And Mills goes, yes. Like he wouldn't even step back. I finally said, this is what stepping back is, which he did show us what stepping back is. Well, do you refer the fight of his before? And of course he goes, well, when Lewis is twice, but not of his half. And then of course he just goes in over and over. And again, I really couldn't say much about everything else because there's a huge deal to it. So, of course, with the punches and everything else being thrown in the fight, with everything else, I think it just goes to show you that Mills tried his best to do his best, make the fight. It is interesting. By the way, there is one other funny thing I want to talk about. Jim, after he's done interviewing him, he goes back to Jim Lampe and George Foreman. Jim Lampe pointed out that the Nevada Athletic State Commission has the ability to withhold Akinwande's, probably half of Akinwande's purse. Could he do it? And George just goes, not at all, because this guy didn't know how to defend himself. He didn't know how to do this. He didn't know how to do that. He was just a man on headlights. He just couldn't do nothing. So George Foreman was defending Akinwande for this fight, knowing that he didn't know what to do. And again, I can't say much about that. It is what it is. But would people ever have that to be said that we have the right to withhold someone's purse because they had a terrible fight? Don't get me wrong. When you're involved in a fight that you did horribly bad, why should we pay you for doing a horrible job fighting? But of course, everything went on. They ignored it and gave Akinwande's full purse, and that's about it. So nothing said. But again, it is what it is. 87 out of 174 punches were landed by Lewis that night. Akinwande, 30 out of 107. It's ridiculous. 2,000 fans came to watch a fight. This is what they got, and what a waste of time. Ridiculous. So yeah, that's it. July the 12th, 1997. And wow, 1997, the month of July and June had a lot of wild moments in the world of combat sports. Well, maybe not for UFC or MMA, but man, wrestling, boxing, love it. Anyway, thank you viewers for watching this episode. And with that being said, happy 4th of July. Happy birthday to the 250th anniversary of the United States of America. Thank you viewers for watching this. Oh, and by the way, while I'm talking about it, I might as well refresh and see what the information is for the FIFA World Cup. Nothing has been reported yet. But as we're talking about it, I am going to try to look up if there's any stuff going on right now in the competition. Nope, the kickoffs of the football matches aren't starting until a few more hours, so we'll wait for an update until then. But with that being said, thank you for watching this episode, and see you next time.